Hey y'all, so it has been a pretty big month in the United States. I know some of you are listening from other countries, and you're probably watching like, what are y'all doing? Is this America, the season finale, right? And if so, what has happened to the show writers? I feel like they either know they're trying to go out with a bang, or maybe they're getting a bonus trying to secure a next season because it has been crazy. We have had, if this was a TV show, it's Emmy Award winning. We've had assassination attempts. We've had people dropping out, people plugging in. Oh my God. I mean, there's so much that is going on. I can barely keep up. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. In our previous chat, you heard me talk about what it's like to try to keep hope, especially when we are raising our children, building businesses, trying to improve ourselves. It can feel really heavy and whiplashy to feel like there's always something going on. But what does it look like to try to keep up hope, stay positive, and stay informed? Because we all have some pretty big decisions to make when we are responsible for our partners and our spouses and our children. And so that's why I wanted to, one, issue a tiny disclaimer. This chat that we're about to have today, if you've tuned into any of my chats, any of my tough talks on social media, you know that I am not trying to curry votes, that I am not trying to dissuade you from believing and thinking and feeling as is right for you, your values, and your homes. And I'm not trying to push you one way or another politically. This conversation, even though we are discussing the concept of politics, is simply on how we can have these conversations in our homes, with our partners, with our neighbors, in a way that's more grace-filled, as well as also address, I think, all of our strong internal personal values, to remain informed, So I don't want you to make any assumptions about my political leanings. I'm not making any assumptions about yours. We are friends who are here to show that you can actually have a conversation about what the heck is going on. Is this place on fire, right? Without trying to set each other on fire. And to help me have this conversation, I brought in your favorite person in the entire world who joins us every single month for any conversation I just don't want to have by myself because it's going to be a lot to carry. And he's here with us today. Alex, my incredible, handsome, wonderful, dear husband. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Without fail.
Without fail. That's it. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, my
But it's good to be
goodness.
back.
Yes,
Good to be
thank you
back.
for being here. So, first and foremost, this conversation is one where I think a lot of, let's be completely honest, people who are influencers, people who are in the media, people that are entertainment, they tend to shy away from talking about anything political right now because it feels so fiery. Do you find that to be the case with you, your friends, your family, the industry?
Um, it's a mixed bag.
Tell me more about that.
It's a mixed bag. I mean, I know that in a lot of spaces, there's so much disagreement between so many different people because you just
Mhm.
have, even though, yes, it's California and California is like known to be a little bit more like liberal.
A little
A
liberal.
little,
This
you
is like
know?
the birthplace of liberal.
Right.
Like, I mean, I
But
feel like every major liberal idea kind of starts over here and makes its way back east. It lands in DC. Like, did you hear what does? Because I grew up in DC.
Right.
It's like, did you hear that in California they're allowed to smoke marijuana? And you're just kind of like, what?
Right.
This is a drug. Like, so people are literally getting arrested for something on the East Coast that you guys are like open engaging in. Like, you
Right.
grew up here though. So.
Right, I did. And even though it does have that reputation and that might be
Mhm.
true, there's a lot of conservatives.
A ton.
There's a ton of conservatives.
Mhm.
And it's just really a mixed bag. And depending on what company you're in, it's people like are nervous to even just bring up politics. And as soon as somebody
Yes.
brings up politics, then you have that one person, no politics, no politics,
Mhm.
because that is going to start a fight.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like the nature of how people talk about politics is that it's going to start
Now.
a fight now.
Now.
And it gets really aggressive because you just can't fathom how the other person can think this way. But it's interesting. We were talking, earlier, and it's the thing that everyone thinks that they are thinking and acting justly
Right. And correct. Like,
and correctly.
it's hard
and
to process outside of your own brain.
Right. And depending on how you think, it's like this side thinks they're acting justly based on their beliefs, and this side thinks the same thing. So everyone's just trying to do the right thing, but what you consider to be the right thing varies from person to person.
Absolutely. I think you're actually like leading us exactly in the right direction. And I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are maybe opening their minds and realizing, wow, I never really thought that other people really genuinely think they're right. When I tell you, when you feel that aggression, when you feel that sort of that fire, that people have behind their views, a lot of times it simply is because they genuinely think that what they're discussing is in your interest too. Like it's because they are passionate about it for their children and their homes and whatever else.
Mhm.
It actually isn't the way that I think we're communicating, right? Where we start getting into name calling or saying like, how could you think that? You must be missing a brain cell. Sentences like that start making it seem like, oh, this isn't about you wondering about my well-being or my future. You're actually just doing it because you're angry or mean or you want ill for me. So like you're saying, people do get really fiery. But what I think is also happening in these conversations is that people are speaking from their own experiences and right now, the resources that you have information from.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of resources. There's more resources available now than ever, really. I mean, and the wealth of information, the amount of news sources that you have,
and the
depending
quality.
and the quality, and then depending on which ones, you tend to watch, it will really sway it has the potential to sway your thought process and your beliefs, and that's on both sides.
Absolutely. One thing that I found is that a lot of people, and this is, I think, actually really normal, right? We're all uncomfortable with the idea of change. And what is comfortable is what is familiar. So, truth moment, I think a lot of you know this if we've been friends for a while, but if you're new around here, I'm obsessed with Law and Order SVU. I am obsessed with
Yes,
it.
you are.
I
Yes, you
have
are.
a 25-year, 25-season relationship with Olivia. I really wish she would just wrap things up with Elliot, settle down, have build a nice home for Noah. If you know, right? So I love Law and Order SVU. But a huge reason why I love it as like one of my preferred programmings is because it's formulaic. It's because I go into it and I know that, at minute, 35, we have caught who we think is the first, killer, right? But the truth is we'll find the actual killer at minute 43,
Mhm.
and it's like, I know exactly when things are coming. And for me, that's comforting. It's less work for my brain. There's psychological evidence that people who rewatch TV series and certain shows and look for things that are familiar, it's because we're seeking that ease and comfort of not having to process as heavily. And I think some of that happens in politics where people are engaging in things that are and spaces that feel familiar and affirm what we already think and believe because we just don't want to feel challenged when we sit down at night after a long day.
Right. And that's actually it's been the most interesting part for me because so I like before, rewind to like, I
When
don't
we
know,
first met, take it
like
way back.
when we first
Mhm.
when we first met, like I was not very politically aware or active or informed. I couldn't speak on much. Like I had my thoughts
Did you
about.
grow up like that?
Yeah, I always thought politics was boring or like I
Mhm.
didn't understand the gravity of like what was happening,
Mhm.
because I
Are your
was
parents that
younger.
way
No,
or
my parents are more informed.
okay.
But politics wasn't something that was like addressed super passionately in the house.
Mhm.
They probably talked between them,
Sure, sure.
but I wasn't really part of that conversation because I
Mhm.
didn't really feel the need to be a part of it or,
Mhm.
I didn't have the yearning to.
Mhm.
But, you know, I remember it was maybe like a year or 2 into our
Okay.
relationship, and I was like, I feel like I'm just not informed enough. I
Oh, I
feel
remember
like
that.
I feel like I need to know more, whatever. And you're like, well, that's great. I mean, you're very well versed
I mean,
in
I grew up in
politics.
DC though, so it's totally comparatively, it was so unfair to you because like
Uh,
I grew up in DC. I was a poli-sci major in college. I went to private schools in DC, so my friends were literally diplomats and like I was as immersed, like I was late to school sometimes because the president's cavalcade was coming. You know what I mean? So it's like that's like
right.
not a
And
normal political depth of knowledge for the average American. I am not the
sure, it's not
barrier.
normal, but it also did highlight just how out of the loop I was.
The disparity,
That
right,
Yeah,
right,
there was
right,
just such a gap there. Even
right.
if you're totally over here and I'm totally over here, like maybe I can at least crawl my way to somewhere towards the middle, you
I
know?
I appreciate that.
Y-
It's one of the things I love about you is you like just knowing more about topics conversationally.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just felt so out of the loop and there's a lot of things happening and I want to understand.
Mhm.
I I get frustrated, like, why is this happening? And I'm like, I can't explain it. I don't understand.
Sure. So
A
what was
few
your process? Because I think a lot of people listening may sometimes feel this way too. I think that a lot of people right now may feel a little bit of A and B, right?
Mhm.
Either I don't really know what's happening and things are changing so fast
Yeah.
and I feel like I can't keep up, right? So one thing happens, I can't keep up, or I've never really been into it. And frankly, I'm fed up. I want to wash my hands. And I think it's really inspiring to hear that you're like, I want to be informed, but where do I start?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
what'd you do?
especially as life progresses and, when we're kind of starting to frame our life to prepare for like, having like a family and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like, we're just getting ready to make bigger life choices and just,
Hmm.
I start thinking about like, okay, if we did have a kid or if we did like, progress in this way, like I want to be able to make decisions and that will impact my children and the next generation
That's
in a
right.
positive way. So I need to become informed. It's a little bit more serious to me now,
You
I
feel like
guess.
you have a vested interest.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
skin in the game,
And I think that yeah, and I think that's interesting because as someone who has always been interested in politics, and when I say that, that's not even about a political leaning. So
Mhm.
I've always, just so everyone kind of hears this, it doesn't mean I don't have my political views. I actually have very strong and clear political views around where I lean. And
Mhm.
anyone who knows me personally knows exactly where I stand. Anyone who pays attention can probably figure out where I stand, right? But for the sake of conversation and just making sure that no one feels excluded, when we have these conversations, because it's really important to me that wherever you stand, that you can come to someone like me and know that I can objectively explain the policy without worrying about a party.
Right.
And so, and that's the type of political person I am. I just
Yeah.
like the details. I think it's
And
interesting.
and so to so to
It's like
hi
TV.
and so to highlight that, one of the things that you kind of turned me on to the idea of that I'd never even crossed my mind to do is that, you know, doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right or a moderate or whatever, you will watch news outlets from both sides, like Fox News, MSNBC, or like, whatever, just like
Or
or
BBC, Al Jazeera,
BBC.
because I want to know what they're saying about us
Well,
too.
yeah, or yeah, BBC, Al Jazeera, like
Right,
like
right.
that part, I was like, wow, that's really interesting to go onto a completely foreign news outlet and see what is being like reported to the people in another part of the country and how that could possibly be influencing what's happening in different parts of the world.
Mhm,
And like our views are based on our morals and what's being taught to us,
mhm,
but what's being taught to them and what's being
mhm.
reported to them. And it's very different than
It is
anything you
very
could
different.
imagine.
Yeah.
If you've never checked it out, I encourage you to check it out because it'll kind of blow your mind just how the news is presented.
And we're talking
And
same piece of news. A
same
great
piece of
example
news.
is the conflict in Gaza
Yes.
right now. I will read Palestinian based outlets, I will read more Western outlets. I'll read BBC, because I think BBC is statistically supposed to be a little bit more liberal, but if they don't have skin in the game, sometimes the article's a little bit more neutralized, but everything kind of has its category. I'll read Al Jazeera,
Yeah.
and
And
it is the same. It literally can be the same event where a hospital was bombed and you will hear different language used to describe it. And in some outlets, one thing we noticed, especially this week with the nomination of Kamala Harris, it is pronounced Kamala, just in
Kamala.
case anyone ever wonders. I worry that sometimes I'm like, how do you say it? It's Tchaikovsky, or like I'll have to look it up, right? So just for anyone who wants to know, it's Kamala, like comma, like the punctuation dash la. Kamala. And anyone who mispronounces it, particularly if you are a politician who's worked with her for 4 years, because as vice president, she's the boss of most politicians. So you don't get your boss's name wrong, or if you are someone who's a journalist, it's actually your job to know how to say her name correctly.
Right.
So just letting you know, it's Kamala if you hear it. Now, with all the news this week, we've actually seen on some outlets that we've watched no mention of certain events that have, like Trump's assassination. I don't even hear it on more liberal outlets. That was last week's news.
That was last week's news.
They're not even talking about
Now
it.
we're now we're highlighting the
Even though it was like one of the biggest ththings to happen in history, right?
Sure.
We don't even hear about it anymore.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And then Kamala, being put in as the nominee, is one of the, like, someone stepping down from an, I can't even remember when I think this may be the first time. I don't think it's ever historically happened. Huge news. We'll watch some of the more conservative outlets, barely discussed.
Mhm.
They're talking about, I think right now, the assassination,
Right. And and one of the things to note on that, it was like, even when we were, for example, watching Fox
Mhm.
and there was somebody on the panel, I can't remember her name, but she was bringing up subject matters that weren't really being covered,
Sure, sure.
on Vox, and it got shut down pretty
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, it was one of those sort of roundtables, kind of like if you watch something like The View, or I think this particular show is called Five, and it's a roundtable where they invite journalists from different places. If you watch like PBS, it's kind of like Meet the Press, where they bring a lot of different journalists around and ask them sort of, what's your take on the thing that's happening? And
Right.
Five on Fox News is an evening show that I think tends to bring on people that aren't necessarily all conservative or all moderate, unlike their host, which tend to be from a more conservative background.
Mhm.
So, and we were surprised. We were watching it. I mean, she was just kind of speaking to some other points of things she'd realized, and people were like, yeah, 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 but what about this thing,
Right, right, right. Deflection, deflection,
Yeah,
deflection.
deflection,
And
deflection.
and of course, like just it really highlighted to me, just like with the Tucker Carlson thing,
Mhm. Oh, if you're not familiar, Tucker Carlson is a host on a Fox News network,
or
and
was.
was actually correct. Thanks for
Mm.
correcting me. And you've probably seen him before. I think he's like adorable looking to me. Like he always wears a bow tie, and I think that's part of his
Mm.
signature branding. And he was known for having very staunch and I'll say inflammatory views. And I say inflammatory not as a judgment or an indictment on the things he says, but they were said with the intention to create a extreme response.
Mhm.
We want, like, I am really speaking to the people who support me, and then the people who don't, I want y'all to feel fired up, right?
Right.
So that was what he was known for, was just, I'll say things that'll really get people's gullet, right?
Right. And all of his views were leaning definitely a certain
I would say he
direction.
was more conservative.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
100%. And then it comes out that he was texting on the side and on a
Right.
personal basis, texting to have the exact opposite views of what he was
Mhm.
expressing on the show.
Extensively, like
Ex-
lots of text messages like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it kind of, and then obviously he got fired because
Right.
like
Because
you
it's an
can't,
integrity play.
it's an integrity
Yeah,
thing.
it's not a good look.
But also it really just highlights the fact that like, so to back it up even, like
Mhm.
when I was younger, my mom always would read the newspaper and always watch the news and all this stuff. And she'd be like, well, I saw in the news or I read this article that blah, 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 blah happened. And, you should watch out for da, da, da. And,
Like a mom.
like a mom does, which is
Right.
all valid and true. But at the end of the day, and I always had the view of like, well, this may be true, but the news it's a TV show. It
Mhm.
is a television
Mhm.
show. They need ratings to remain
Mhm.
on the air. Otherwise, they get canceled. And what better way to, get viewership than instilling fear? I mean, there's a lot of good things in the world that don't get reported, but it's a lot of the bad stuff. And the bad stuff, we do need to know about it.
Yes.
Yes, we do need to know about it. It's good to be informed on that stuff, but it's always seems to be the things that are highlighted. And that's what brings people back is, this cycle of kind of like fear. And so whatever the news said, I don't take
Mm.
as gospel.
Which is, I think, really important, honestly. Maybe that's part of the problem now, right? Is that people are looking at their media sources, whether it's TikTok, the
Like
news,
this is
whatever.
absolute fact. This is what's being
It's
said.
what I
This
should
must be
believe.
true.
It's
It's
the
what I
truth.
should believe. And
Right,
what happens is a
right.
lot of people just kind of regurgitate what they hear,
Mm.
as their own views. And then that ends up just being what is like true. I'm doing air quotes
Yeah,
right
right.
now.
Air quotes. Yeah, people need to learn to think for themselves while by looking at the raw information
Right.
without the filter of
Right.
media. And I know we talked a lot about conservative outlets, and I just want to be clear. We use conservative outlets as an example here, like Fox News and things that they do in their coverage of conservative things. Liberal outlets do this as well. We've been watching this past week, and there is nothing but coverage for how, Kamala is the second coming of Barack Obama. The polls are going off, how she is going to
Right.
rescue the Democratic Party. And I just want to say, no matter how you feel about that, whether it's true or not true or exciting, that is a lot of pressure on one person, which also can lend you to believe that, like, whatever you're hearing is probably ever so slightly exaggerated on both sides.
Right.
You know what I
and
mean?
so
Truth lies in the middle.
right. And so to
Mhm.
finish out the thing is that, it's the realization that one, it's a TV show.
Yes.
Two, these networks and these shows are run by executives and they have there's this hierarchy, right? Who decides what conversations will happen on there, what points of views will be expressed. That's why when Tucker Carlson, when it came out that he thought something different, he was fired because we can't have somebody who thinks this on a show where the person running the show has one set of views and values, but if an anchor,
Hmm.
doesn't,
And
he
our
doesn't belong on
viewers
our
are
show.
looking for this.
And our
This is
viewers
what
are
they
like,
came for.
yeah, right. So when you're watching a network, you're really watching the points of views and stuff of the people who run the show. You
Mm.
know what I mean? And so that's why I feel like you have to watch both. You have to watch a bit of the conservatives, a bit of the liberals to understand where they're both coming from so you can form your own opinions. Just like, with the Gaza thing, we watch our own. We looked up Al Jazeera,
Hmm.
and I even, read the Hamas manifesto.
That's correct.
I read
Hmm.
it's long. I read like half of it. It's really
Hmm.
long, but
But
like,
also going into history
but
too.
going into history
Yeah.
and like knowing your reason, I'm like, let me hear from the horse's mouth as much as I
Hmm.
can instead of just hearing from all these middlemen who
Hmm.
are, have their points of views, but let me
Hmm.
form my own based on all the information,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and it's important.
Yeah, it is important. I think one
Yeah.
of the things that gets tough is we hear a lot about what are legitimate media outlets now, and I think a lot of people feel that when they're watching, so
It's hard to know which
it's
one's
hard to
legit or not because
know.
everything's a scam. Everything's
Yeah. Well, so I
satire
do feel like
or
there's a little, I mean, I do feel like that's a stretch, right? Because, I never want to minimize that journalists have to go through a full educational, suite to get degrees and they're well-studied
right. And
academics,
I and I don't and I don't mean that everything is actually a scam, but it's
Right.
like, but it's
When we get to social media, though, that's where it starts
it's just hard to
getting
know sometimes what's
correct.
real and what's not when
Correct.
it's just so much of it's just so mixed. There's AI now, and it's just
Hmm.
sometimes it's just hard to tell
No,
unless you
and
know
that's
exactly
so
where to look.
true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I find that if you're an academic or if you've studied, one thing that we're always taught is healthy skepticism,
Mhm.
right? Like scientists understand this, that even if you come to some conclusion with your data, you need to test your data because we all have our natural biases, right? So that's something as someone who considers themselves a student of politics, when I watch liberal media outlets and when I watch conservative media outlets, I still get fired up because I have my strong opinions. So I mean, like, when we watch some outlets, I'm like, I need a palate cleanser. This got me so heated, or I don't want to watch this. My blood pressure is going to go up. You
Right.
know what I mean? So when I watch these respective outlets, it is not uncommon for me to watch. I'll hit pause and you'll see me look something up. And I'll get to Wikipedia. I will pull up white papers. I will actually pull up legislative law, or I will check something with the articles of the Constitution. Because if they're saying something, we have the resources to actually reference what it is they're looking for. So I think a lot of us forget, or maybe don't even know, that our government is supposed to be self-service, right? So if you think of the government when you're walking into a grocery store, you have a choice to have your things checked out by a cashier who will tell you the price of it, have a conversation with you about the product, or you can go through the self-service checkout, hit a button for more information, and learn more about the product yourself.
Mhm.
But either way, the point is when you exit that grocery store, you should be able to get that information you need about the product. And the same thing is supposed to apply to our government. Unfortunately, our government was also written by really old people a very long time ago. And that mean that they did it in a way that was a little bit complex. So because it's gotten hard, a lot of people are like, well, I just want my information like summarized to me, to the point where I want it in 15 seconds on TikTok.
Right.
And I just want to encourage everyone to know that 15 seconds of information is going to give you 15-second quality of information. And anything you take in from anywhere should be a starting point for your information on how you're going to inform yourself with your responsibility as a voter.
Mhm.
And, I can tell you transparently, I'm really excited about the future. I don't know about you, but, I do have my moments of like, dang, this place is on fire. But as we plan our family, I try to remind myself that America's gone through wars. America's been through it, and we're still they still had
Like
children.
constantly.
Constantly.
Constantly over the last like 50 years been
Yes.
stuff.
Times that have been worse than where we are right now,
Yeah.
where, people have, everybody has known someone who has lost someone because that's how bad the war was, or they've had to ration their food, or they've had to, everybody quits their job because we're all literally making bullets. I mean, it has been worse, and even though it feels like a different type of worse, I think sometimes, at least for me, I feel like we're in a time where the concept of America is at threat, and that feels like the first time. I think all the different wars we've had before felt like they were in defense of America versus external threats. And now I feel like the concept of America, because we're responsible as citizens for taking care of it, is what we're worried about. And that just
Right.
feels a little bit scarier.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I feel like it's really just taken over by it's a lot of pride.
Mhm.
It's a lot of pride
Mhm.
between parties, between
Yes.
people's personal beliefs,
Mhm.
and everyone wants to be right or live on the moral high ground. It's the pride we kind of get overwhelmed in the pride, like trying to prove that we're right.
Mhm.
Trying to prove that we're right, that we end up just acting in a way that
Sometimes we
we might
forget what
not
we're fighting
otherwise.
about. I
Yeah, that's
think.
what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
we
Is
forget
like
what we're fighting
we
about
forget
because we
what
just
we're
wanna be right.
we just want to be right. It's like
Mhm.
people just fact checking each other and proving each other wrong, and we're
Mhm.
forgetting that we just need the best leader, or like we just want to
Right.
live in a safe country. It's like we just want to be right.
I
It's
and I think that if we can remember that at the core of every discussion, people are really just trying to make sure their families are okay, that their future feels hopeful and positive,
Mhm.
that what we leave as a legacy really matters. And if you find that conversations seem to be about personal interests without thinking of wider interests. So if you're talking to or hearing a politician that you feel doesn't necessarily seem like they're considering their neighbors, people who may not look like them, people who may have a different existence than them, for me that's always kind of a bell, a little bit of an alarm of, okay, I need to expand, my research around this candidate or this person, because at the end of the day, all of our time here is very short, and we just wanna leave it better than we found it, I think.
I mean, yeah, that's really
That's the plan.
that's the plan.
So what's the next step then, right? Like, where do people go from here? I know that I have some thoughts to kind of leave people with where as we're engaging in this space and, you know, almost being forced to kind of pay more attention to politics. And, if you're a more liberal person, it's a really hopeful time right now because there have been some shifts in the party and we've seen a lot of rallying around Kamala Harris. And that is exciting and invigorating and refreshing. And it feels like a fight is being put into the game that, previous candidates may not have had the energy for, so that is really encouraging. And if you're a more conservative candidate, you're coming off of a lot of hits, with this assassination attempt and a shift in the political landscape. But they've always had a candidate that I think has really spoken their language on some levels and which feels, I guess, refreshing for them because it seems like it's a more basic language, I guess, compared to something that may, like, when you think of Reagan times, it's more highbrow, I think the party's
Mhm.
made a shift into uh even though it's being led by a billionaire, or a presumptive billionaire, I think numerically,
Right.
but even though it's being led by a presumptive billionaire, the party I think is trying to restyle themselves as the party of the working man, even though historically it hasn't been. So, because unions and and labor and
Yeah, I think a lot of
minorities
people
are
feel
more
good.
democratic,
A lot of people feel good about having
I think people
somebody.
kind of are feeling better about their candidates, even if we're like, we still don't like the political process. So
Everybody likes to feel represented,
everyone likes to feel represented. I
right?
think that
At the end of the
maybe
day.
now people may feel slightly more seen, even if the thing I'm hearing uniformly is people are like, we hate this. Get me out of here. Like this is not, we're all excited about our candidates maybe, but it's just kind of this process is trash. And so I have some thoughts on how people can survive this process, if you will, politically, but I definitely want to hear yours because what are your thoughts as a regular person? What are you going to do to make sure that this political time doesn't eat you up? We have a ways to go, 100 more days.
Oh man, I mean, it's not gonna eat me up. I mean, how am I gonna make sure? I mean,
You're taking it all in. Like I see
I'm
you
just,
react on to TV. You're
I
just
mean,
like, no way,
I'm keeping myself informed, but I'm also not letting it take over my life.
That's right.
I'm like, I still have my own life. I'm still forming my opinions as information comes in. I'm not hard set in my ways. If I'm presented with information that will change the direction of my thinking, I'm remaining open minded
Mhm.
to that. Either way it goes. But I'm trying to just live my life.
Mhm.
Like
We're so responsible for our day to day.
you can't be consumed by the stuff that'll drive you nuts.
Yes.
It'll drive you insane, and you just can't, or that'll be it.
Yeah, we still have to pay attention to our families. We still have to have hope for the future, and showing up, I think, is part of that.
Mhm.
One thing that I want to encourage everyone is that on a basic level, there's a lot going on in this world, and that's not changing anytime soon. I just want to encourage all of you as you are engaging in the political process to just be mindful of being gracious and respectful. So, and I will actually reference the parties, the candidates specifically. When speaking about Kamala Harris, whether or not you believe in her qualifications or her policies, it is really important to respect her as a woman, as a Black woman, and as the Vice President of the United States of America. And that is without respect of, you can hammer out her policies all day. You can go into her qualifications, although on resume, like if her resume didn't have her name on it, I mean, it's the same resume of anyone who's ever had the job,
Mm.
or people lesser have had the job. So, you're absolutely able to have discourse about whether or not she could earn your vote, but that discourse should 100% categorically not include factors surrounding her race, her gender, her ethnicity, her marital status, her proclivities, around intimacy, or anything whatsoever that does not pertain to her ability to do the job. And when it pertains to the conservative candidate, Donald Trump, it's really important that, again, we encourage conversation around policies. So, where it can be very easy to slip into name calling or to slip into, drawing attention to things like his children, even though I get that they're adult, but his children, he actually has one that's kind of young. I think that's like 16. But his children, his wives, I think only one still is alive, but I think he's had like three wives and I think he has children by all of them or something like that.
Mm.
But it's really important to focus on things that are on paper that are clear, and then of course focus on his policies. So if you find that you have a lack of clarity around his policies, go inform yourself. If you find yourself struggling to find information around that, ask those questions. Just make sure you understand that it's not just for both candidates, it's not just the promise of what you say you will do, like I'm going to change this thing, that you're asking yourself as an informed voter, how? Walk me through the steps. And that is something you can do amongst your peers as well. So if they're just like, well, that person's a bonehead. Well, that person doesn't, deserve the job. Well, that person, is a felon. They may be a felon that's been convicted of 34 felonies by a jury of their peers that was of mixed party representation here in America. But it doesn't change the fact that, they're still eligible to do the job. And we need to ask how they can do the job, And so, some things may speak to character, but, hey, they're running, So let's talk about how they're going to show up every single day. So I just really want to encourage you to stick to the policies, stick to the qualifications. Let's not be gross and icky and debase ourselves by demeaning people's appearances on either side, because it's just a distraction. We don't have to take after the media that way and distract ourselves. We can do better.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here. This stuff is hard to talk about. I think it's,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can be tense.
Yeah. It can be, but
Mhm.
just keeping an open mind and doing your own research, forming your own opinions, I think is just the name of the game.
And you managed to do that. I think you're a great example of someone who went from zero to, increasingly informed every day, in a year.
Yeah, I'm really trying, and that's all we can do.
That is all we can do.